Apex Online Racing is sponsored by Elgato, who created this lovely stream deck. For more information about the stream deck, the link is in the description below.
released onto the field. Obviously, being the middle class, you expect probably quite a few drivers there, and there definitely are. So we have a lot of people showing up for that. Hotly contested, therefore, a lot of the time, especially in qualifying. We've seen in recent rounds that the Pro-Am drivers have been challenging a lot more at the front of the field than perhaps usual. This is kind of why drivers like Dancy and Cass and Schiff have been promoted, because they were, especially in qualifying, much further up the field than their other Pro-Am compatriots. So I think it's going to be a lot nicer, maybe splitting the classes more equally, because of the fact that then you kind of get a lot more racing that means something. But obviously that requires us to get through qualifying first. We'll have to see how it all shakes up.
And as we approach the end of the AM qualifying session, we'll soon start to see our Pro-Am drivers currently sitting on the pit exit. Taking a look here at Thomas Santo. He is in the 317 Porsche, starting a lap, also on track currently. Daniel Mamano just finished another lap. Jorge Reyes, Alessandro Pontecorve aborted a lap, and Merlin Cooper still on a lap, as well as Daniel Mamano. Those Raptor Racing teammates still working together there, as we now are seeing the beginning of our Pro-Am drivers coming out on their out laps. Chris Yardley, Marvin Sluman among those. I also see Hooper and Edouard also out there. So just a couple of our AM drivers finishing up as the Pro-Am is chasing them in.
Yep. Just trying to look through the lap times and just make sure that people are all on are all kind of keeping within the lines, because as you can see around the track, there's a lot of grass. Grass means if you touch that, you basically get an off-track penalty, which invalidates your lap. And I think Merlin Cooper is the last driver I can see who's out on the track to set a lap time. Currently sat 9th on the grid, so coming across the line now, we'll have to see what sort of lap time he puts in. It's 42.608, which doesn't improve his position.
Yes, indeed, and currently on the track, about to start their hot laps, Alex Schmidt, Marvin Sluman, and Dan Alpel, currently out there. That is the 299 from 241 from 271. So that is, of course, our Pro-Am drivers. And they are now, looks like at the beginning of them, that is Alex Schmidt, currently coming through the short chute and towards the start-finish line rapidly, approaching that start-finish line. Just behind him, another Porsche, trying to get a tow from that car. And now on board with him, as we will take a lap. Let's follow Schmidt around here as he goes into turn 1, gonna slam those brakes hard, shift down, and throw it to the right. Doesn't quite hit the apex there, swings wide, but able to keep the momentum going in that car. Comes back up. The S is here, gonna hold tight to the right, then swing it to the left, try and keep it as close to that yellow line as possible. Less feet to the lap, and now it's just keep that foot to the floor and try not to break your gas pedal.
Coming down now towards the carousel, one of the trickiest corners because of its high-speed natures. These cars do not have a lot of downforce. Alex gets it pitched in very nicely, gets on the throttle well, hits the apex, looked very clean. Now coming down the hill again, gets it all. And once again, as we ride on board, people do not seem to be getting through that corner very well at all.
Commentators curse.
It's not easy, that corner. Turn number 6, the chute as it is called. It's just because you're braking downhill and turning in at the same time. It really it just puts a lot of load on the car and unsettles it as it's going through there. And it doesn't help that it is very fast in a car with not much downforce, so cars don't really tend to stick through there that easily.
So currently at the top of the charts for the Pro-Am drivers, Andreas Ludus in the 236, followed by Kiefer McKenna in the 291, and Ben Goldie in the 247. Currently, none of the Pro-Am drivers have gone faster than the Am drivers, though I assume that will change as they get those tires warmed up. Tires and tire temp, very important at this track because of how abrasive it is, so you gotta really get the grip out of them. Marvin Sluman just coming across the line. He will go third fastest. Dan Alpel takes the pole away from Falco Vierkamp with a 140.869. That is the first lap to go below a 141 of this qualifying session so far. Now Victor Mateos in the Hyperion Racing, that is a Porsche. He will come across the line in 8th position overall, and I believe that is 4th or 5th in class. As Kiefer McKenna has now gone faster, still a 141.2, so Dan Alpel still the only one in the 1 minute 40 bracket. But the 291 of Kiefer McKenna, that is the V3 Racing entry, in P2 overall now.
Andreas Lutus, the 236 BMW coming across the line at the moment, sets a 42.2, which sets him 16th on the grid. Other than that, we have now sort of this changeover period that you get in the current qualifying system where drivers have done their first lap and they're now going to go out and start their second out laps to try and keep those tires fresh, because they have kind of a really good run on the first lap at the moment. These tires, sort of like a qualifying tire, essentially. They're really kind of only good for one hot lap, so drivers will go out, do their out lap, do their flying lap, and then come back into the pits and try and do it again, because it's kind of, in terms of time losses, and especially in such a close qualifying, it's not worth taking that extra time loss from doing the second lap.
And taking a look here at Oleksiy Seleznev in that very bright pink number 205 BMW. He will come across the line here. He's currently in 8th. Let's see if his time will improve. Yes, he does improve by 1 position over Jan Calmet. And taking a look at Marvin Sluman in the livery of shame, that default liveried Porsche 911, currently in 4th. He will come across the line. Let's see if he is able to improve. Not quite.
Invalid lap from Marvin there, so clearly he had some sort of issues. or I don't know whether it was. I don't know if it was an outlap, but something was not right about that. But he's definitely going at it. But he got very twitchy going through the S's, and I mean he kept it all together, which is very good. But that will not be optimal if he's trying to set a fast lap time. Weirdly staying to the right of the straight, which is kind of odd because it's very bumpy over there, and you do tend to lose a bit of time. And actually, Marvin's pulled over. I think he realizes that might be his qualifying attempts over for the day because he will not have a chance to set another hot lap because he cannot get to the line in time.
Well, we're now taking a look at Ben Goldie in the, I believe that is a Comrade Gaming Ford GT. Don't be mistaken, he does have pro banners and plates on his car. However, he is in the Pro-Am class as indicated by his number 247. He is currently scored 12th with a 142.0. The top of the chart still looking pretty much the same with the top three not changing. Alpel from McKenna from Veerkamp. That is a BMW from a Ferrari, I believe that is. Now taking a look at Tom Hooper in the Radicals Online BMW. That is the number 232 car. He has not yet put down a lap. And just behind him is another string of BMWs. BMWs being showing to be very strong. We've seen several teams switching over to the BMW. What are your thoughts on that with teams being able to switch anytime there is a balance of performance change from iRacing?
I mean, it combats the issue we had last season, which was that there was a significant balance of performance change 1 week into the season for the Ford. And the Ford, which only had about 6 drivers that had picked it for the season, went from basically one of the worst cars to the best car by a mile. And I don't think that's very fair on the drivers. One thing I would criticize is that I don't see how it's quite fair that there can be a very minor change, and then it might not even affect the cars that the driver is either switching from or switching to. And so, I don't know, say the BMW had, I don't know, its fuel consumption increased a tiny bit. Does that count as a BOP change? And also, then can a Ford driver switch to a Ferrari driver? I mean, maybe this is something that the stewards would look at, and they would say, we're not going to allow BOP change, we're not going to allow changes for this, but it's one of those things that we have to look at. I mean, we haven't had the scenario yet. We've only had one BOP change, and it was a very big BOP change. The entire tyre model changed. The BMW went faster, and it's a car that a lot of people wanted to drive. So I had no issues with it then, but I think it's going to be very circumstantial.
And now we're taking a look at Kiefer McKenna. Now, to speak of the stewards panel was pretty interesting after last week. We had some disagreements between Asger Hebsgaard and a few other drivers. So we did see a penalty for the points leader. That is Stephen Broomfield, the points leader in Pro-Am. We saw him get a penalty. In addition, we'll have 3 drive-through penalties for 3 different drivers in this race. But the driver who really got nailed, so to speak, by the stewards panel was Asger Hebsgaard in the Pro class, that 157 car. He not only has a drive-through, but 2 stop-and-go penalties that he will have to serve in this race. So that's going to be pretty interesting to look at, as now we can see that our Pro class has all lined up very tidy among them. There are a couple of Pro-Am drivers kind of tied in there among them, finishing up their laps. But now we're going to see the fastest of the fast take their shot here. Just to remind everybody watching, the current fastest time is set by Dan Alpel. The only lap to go below a 1 minute 41. That's a 140.869, though we will expect to see faster. Taking a look here at Blair Mann, the Comrade Gaming Ford, on board with him coming up the S's. As you can see just how stable that car looks headed up the S's, despite how bumpy the track is. Definitely having pretty hands on the wheel there is Blair Mann. He's shown a good bit of speed, not quite at the top end of it, but his consistency has been pretty much unmatched this season, especially amongst his teammates. I mean, Comrade Gaming in Suzuka, for example, was all over the place. You had Martin Nedelik winning the race by a pretty significant margin over Rainer Talvar, who started at the back. However, they had an incident at the start of the race between two of their teammates that resulted in a drive-through for jumping the start. So that's been a pretty interesting storyline for that team with the number of cars that they have, and them trying to show their dominance as a team throughout all three of the classes.
Yeah, I mean, CRG, well, they now have all but one of their drivers, I believe, into the pro category, which is good going. But yeah, when they were all together at that start in Suzuka, things got very hectic. And CRG sometimes have team orders, but also very often don't, and they like to race each other in previous seasons gone by. And sometimes maybe that might be something to have a look at for them, because things like Suzuka, which happened where Martin had a very questionable start, it was pulled into the stewards room for it. I think he got away with it slightly. I think he got warned about it. I can't really remember. This was a couple of weeks ago now. That incident was brought up, but I just, yeah, it's a kind of a case of sometimes you gotta, at least at the race start, kind of go, we've got an hour and 20 to sort things out between you. Could you at least just, not mess each other up off the start, because that might be beneficial for the team at least.
Yeah, certainly an interesting team debrief after that race, I'm sure. Now, unsurprisingly, at the top of the charts has gone Rainer Talvar, the points leader in the pro category. Has been pretty much dominating this season so far with a 140.5. That's 4 hundredths of a second faster than P2. Currently, Alex Bennett in the 111 car. Dan Alpel's lap still standing in P3. Then Andy Gordon in the 185, followed by Blair Mann and Martin Nedelik, those two teammates. And Cass Hogenaut, who had a very strong performance a couple weeks ago in Suzuka. In the 150 car, he is currently scored in 7th. As nearly a spin, that's very sideways for Rainer Talvar in that issue. We've seen several cars with issues. He'll go out again. He resets the car, goes out again in that issue, just entering the boot. So, I mean, he could probably sit on that 140.5 and still have a strong performance, but clearly he does not feel confident enough with that lap to sit on it. So Talvar going to go out for another lap. Now taking a look at Asger Hebsgaard. He's been quite an interesting name in the news in that bright orange 157 BMW. As I mentioned, he will have 3 different penalties he has to serve this race. So gonna be pretty interesting. Hopefully he'll be smart enough to keep his nose out of trouble for the next couple weeks and try to stay under the radar for the sake of everyone's sanity.
And actually, around Asger right now, we have a lot of people that are all trying to kind of, it's sort of Monza 2019-esque, because nobody wants to be the first car because of that massive run from turn 1 all the way up into the loop, the outer loop at turn 5, where it's basically just completely flat out, and slipstream can gain you multiple tenths on your lap, and it's just oh so crucial. It was the same story last week at Daytona. Nobody wants to be the first car with all that banking, and just, I mean, pretty much the entire lap is a slipstream fest at that point. So it's just one of those things where when you have this open qualifying, which we do here, other than presumably next week when we go to Nordschleife in Germany, it's gonna basically end up meaning that you want to have that slipstream, because there isn't much dirt here. There's a lot more of a slipstream benefit, and it's going to increase your straight line speed drastically as they head towards the turn 5 as Asger is now.
And taking a look at Patrick Witowski in the 123 car, not a very strong lap from him as his initial lap of 151.1. So it's clearly had some issues on that, nearly 10 seconds off the pace. He will come across the line now. That is a 141.7, so that will score him 21st on the grid. So not quite breaking into the top 20. The top 3 still stands as it was at the beginning of the session. Rainer Talvar, Alex Bennett, Dan Alpel. That is Pro-Am at the top. And looks like Witowski going to keep going. Dancy also out for a lap. Craig Dancy is an interesting name, considering we were discussing a couple weeks ago whether or not he should be in the pro class. It has been decided that he should be, so he has been moved to the 154 car, and that is currently scored 10th on the grid as Cass Hogenaut goes just faster than him almost immediately after. So now we are taking a look at Asger Hebsgaard. He is coming around for his first timed lap, and that is going to be a 140.6, so a really strong lap from Hebsgaard. P3 on the grid. He will make it all-pro on the top 3 positions. Blair Mann now comes across the line and beats that lap with 140.6. So that will be 2 of the 3 Comrade Gaming cars on the front, in the front 3. Andy Gorton, who has had a strong run and has been holding his own in the points very well in that Heritage Ford GT livery, in the slipstream of the BMW just ahead of him, coming up the hill. He is currently in the 6th position. I mean, he's shown just how consistent he can be. Not necessarily a name that we've spoken a lot about, but he's quietly had very strong finishes. And kind of the opposite of that is the 196 of Mike Skeppers, currently scored 7th. We've had several situations where he's showed strong pace. Started off the season in the Ferrari, but has changed over to the Ford, that V3 Racing team. But there have been several situations, including Imola and Suzuka, where he's just kind of quit. So despite definitely having really good pace, and takes a lick into the wall.
That's the end of his qualifying.
Yes, I would imagine so. And knowing him, that could very well have been intentional, just to show that car who's boss. Now taking a look at Alfie Lawrenson. That's a name we haven't talked about a lot in the pro category. The 152 BMW, currently scored in the 9th position, so just within top 10, and that's going to be an invalidated lap. So he decides that it's time to park it in a spectacular fashion, as Michael Edens in the Venom Racing BMW will pull off to the side, and that will just about close out our session. Just under a minute left, but I don't believe we have any cars on track.
Nope.
So let's take a look at our top few qualifiers. Let's go through the top 10. Rainer Talvar with a 140.420. There's a meme for you. Alex Bennett in the 111, followed by his teammates Martin Nedelic and Blair Mann. So Comrade Gaming locking out 3 of the top 4 positions. Asger Hebsgaard in 5th, followed by Andy Gorton in that Ford number 185. Dan Alpel, the highest of the Pro-Am drivers, followed by Mike Skeppers, Alfie Lawrenson, and Cass Hogenout in the end of the top 10. Craig Dancy just outside by less than a tenth of a second. So having a look at this pace, a good variety in the top, a lot stronger of a performance from specifically the pro drivers than we saw the last 2 weeks at Daytona and Suzuka. Daytona and Suzuka, we saw a lot more of a mix between the pro and pro-am in qualifying. So what do you expect to see here? James, how do you expect this to shake out between the pro drivers with how close this pace is?
Well, this is kind of what I was alluding to in qualifying. Other than Alpol, the top 12 are now all pro drivers. And, I mean, obviously points, we use the normal FIA point scoring system, which is 25 points for winning, etc., like you would see in series like Formula 1. And essentially what this means is that you've now kind of got a points... Well, you've got points and not points all together in the same category up front, it makes for a lot better racing because an overtake actually significantly means something. I mean, it's a little bit... you lose the aspect of, you can use other class cars to try and fight battles for you or whatever, but it kind of means in terms of raw racing, we've got actual battles between classmates, which just promotes better racing in that situation. I mean, again, it's still the same thing for all 3 categories as well, where we've got a big cluster of pro-ams together in the middle and then AMs at the bottom, which shows that I think at the moment we've got a good class system going. I mean, obviously you're going to get a few irregularities here and there, but it just means that I think the entire race itself should be slightly better. I mean, obviously there's the whole strategy element of having to fuel save and deal with that sort of thing, but at least any overtake that goes on track will be more likely to be something meaningful.
Yes, and worth noting, just over a second, so 1.001 seconds between 1st and 18th in qualifying. So the pace is certainly going to be quite close between our leaders. as the cars are gridding up now and getting ready to go. So looks like the pace car will be rolling off in just a moment. Anything else you'd like to note before we get going here?
Well, we've got a full pace lap, so I mean, we've got a long time before the green flag, but this is kind of the time for drivers that they hate the most, because I mean, especially personally, I hate having a full formation. It just is like, I just want to get racing. Once I've done qualifying, I just want to kind of get racing. I don't want to be thinking too much about what's going to happen and whatever. I just want to get in there, get stuck in, try and, like, if I've had a bad qualifying, I want to make up for it. If I've had a good qualifying, I want to capitalize on it. So when we're sat here at Watkins Glen with this longer formation lap, it just means that the drivers have more time to essentially kind of psych themselves out of it. But also at the same time, it does mean that some drivers who aren't like me, who have a different mentality, would sort of be in the sense of trying to work out kind of what they want to do, because they might not be in the mindset of, oh, I want to get in and race. They might be thinking, who am I fighting? Who can I slipstream off? Who can I save fuel? Basically, what sort of is what is my game plan for this race? And especially in the hot temperatures that we've got here, it's 43 degrees track temp, which is very above average for a lot of the races, especially this season. So they've got to be thinking about tires, keeping them cool, not necessarily changing them, but don't overheat them too quickly, because especially as we've seen in places like turn 6, the drivers have been having a lot of issues with their tires, and that can basically just kind of end your race because there's a barrier right there, and we've seen people crash into it in qualifying.
Well, it is summertime in this part of the world, in the northeast of the United States, that western hemisphere. So we'll expect to see some very hot temps here. We went from Florida, which is notoriously hot and humid, now up to the north, up the east coast, to near where I live, as a matter of fact, about 4 hours north. As they are coming through the boot, you could take a look down that chute at the long line of cars looking to get racing. So 4 of those Comrade Gaming liveried cars. Actually, that is interesting. I just noticed this. It may be an error, but it does look like Rainer Talvar is in a Comrade Gaming liveried car.
There has been a driver transfer, so to speak. Rainer has signed for CRG. He left Radicals midweek, and so it is actually a CRG 1, 2, 3, 4. At the moment, it's just that obviously within constructor standings, he might still be registered as a Radicals man, but that's just because we need to get the transition all the way over, because he now leads 3 of his teammates instead of 3 of his rivals, essentially.
So Comrade Gaming increasing its notoriety and beefing up its driver lineup. As you can see, the drivers falling off the back of the pace car, letting the pace car get ahead. Rainer Talvar will control the start ahead of his teammates. Take a look at the field coming out of the short chute and getting ready. 50 engines raring and ready to go, as we will go green here in Watkins Glen International, and Rainer Talvar is already away. The green flag waves, and they are already single file 1, 2, 3, 4 heading into the 90-degree right-hander at turn 1. We'll see if we can get through there cleanly. Obviously, a lot of carnage is possible there with how fast they go through there. All those drivers hopping over that curb and coming up the S's comes Rainer Talvar, leading his teammates all single file for the top 5. Still side by side in the back, but they are single filing out, managing to get a clean start, it looks like, for the top of the field. Not many changes for position, just everyone staying calm. Though it looks like a look for the lead from the leaders. Oh, and they're wrecking. A lot of movement there from... Oh, no, not wrecking. My bad. Slow car, that's Thomas Lagney in the 220 BMW. Looks like he may have made a mistake coming up the S's. And a change for the lead there, as Alex Bennett has taken it away from Rainer Talvar. Interesting move, using the slipstream to get around his teammate quite so early. That'll be an interesting conversation of teammates, considering how much of the pro class is made up by Comrade Gaming. Anything you noticed on that start?
Well, the entire start was actually very clean, especially for Watkins Glen. You've got that really tight S section with the walls very close at the start of the lap. The only issue was that one you pointed out of Thomas Laney. What he did is he got very loose, sort of over the crest in that S section, and just trying to catch it, glanced the wall with his rear left tire, and he's basically just slammed the side of his car into that wall, and probably has got quite a lot of suspension damage to deal with right now. So other than that, we didn't have any major incident. Everybody else seemed to get through very cleanly, which is always nice to see, especially after last season where we had a pretty much roadblock going through the sort of uphill left at the end of the boot section. So yeah, always better to see drivers making it through, and especially after a lot of first lap incidents of late, especially from last season with the cold tires. Always good to see as Lanny comes into the pits, because his car is extremely damaged.
And a side-by-side move in turn 1, Andy Gorton will take 5th place away from Asger Hebsgaard. That is forward from BMW. Hebsgaard going to try to recover and make a move back in the slipstream. Andy Gorton defends the inside. Hebsgaard going to have to take the long way around as they skip the bus stop inner loop, and Gorton going to hold on the inside. Will Hebsgaard be able to keep up the momentum enough to maintain the position? They're still side by side. Now Hebsgaard will have the preferred line going into the boot, and Gorton able to slide in behind him. So Hebsgaard effective in keeping and holding off Andy Gorton's move. Alex Bennett still leads. That's still 1, 2, 3, 4 for Comrade Gaming. Gorton again on the inside of Hebsgaard, not giving it up, but Hebsgaard not making it easy to take away either. The BMW with that grunt coming up the hill, and we have one off-track Ben Goldie. That is a Comrade Gaming car, the 247 in the wall, headed to the toe of the boot. So not so good for that Comrade Gaming Ford. Now to take a look back at that battle, Gorton has taken it away from Hebsgaard. I think he will have it this time as they head through a section that's not quite advantageous to be side by side. Gorton showing the pace of that Ford early on in the race.
Yeah, he's trying to make up his mind.
Oh, we have one off.
Oh.
We have an off in the AM class. Thomas Coombe has gone around, re-entering the short chute. That is the V3 Racing Ford, and he has Ben Goldie just behind him, so 2 cars very slow. Or is that Ben Goldie? Yes, that is Ben Goldie just behind him. So that's 2 Fords that have had issues and are now going to have to try to catch back up to the field.
Yeah, Goldie looks in better shape than Coombe does. Coombe's diffuser has taken a bit of a knock, whereas Goldie has, what I can see, basically minimal damage, just had a driving error, but managed to keep it out of the many walls that line the edges of this racetrack.
The battle for 5th place raging on. That is between Gorton and Hebsgaard. Hebsgaard has taken it back. Now Mike Skepper's looking to make a move on the inside of the BMW ahead of him. And side by side between Cass Hoganout, trying to make a move on, I'm not sure who that is ahead of him. That is Dan Alpel. So that is the leader in Pro-Am under pressure from a pro driver. Looks like the pro drivers have actually caught up with one another. Dan Alpel now only 3 cars between himself and Kiefer McKenna in 2nd place in class. So Cass Hoganout, Craig Dancy, and Marcus Lukaszek. Those are the 3 pro drivers stuck between the leader and 2nd place in Pro-Am, which makes it pretty interesting. The gap in pace between Pro-Am and Pro is not very large here at Watkins Glen International, so that's going to make the race very interesting. As we take a look at the 248, that is Cass Hoganout, and he will maintain his position, currently under pressure from the Radicals Online car just behind him. Yeah. And as they come across the line, yep, that will maintain position.
So this battle between Gorton and Hebsgaard is very advantageous for the CRG 1, 2, 3, 4 that is out in front, because Hebsgaard is now around 1.4 seconds off the Ford of Blair man in front, which means that he won't be feeling the benefit of the slipstream that those guys in front are having, which means they can try and break away using the pace of both Bennett and Talvar. They could even possibly do some trading, but I think Talvar wants to save fuel because I don't think he thinks he can get away from this pack, and he'll want to be the one taking advantage of that rather than being out front. Any oval racing fans will completely and utterly understand that mentality of being much happier just sitting there saving fuel and not having to take as much in the pit stops. And that's sometimes more advantageous than just trying to gun it out front because you can't break the slipstream.
So that is, we're taking a look now at Asger Hebsgaard, still battling for P5. That's team question mark from a privateer entry of Andy Gorton. I mean, that's about the closest battle we have on track. Just behind them, though, is the V3 Racing car of that is Mike Skeppers. He is trying to follow Alfie Lawrenson and try to take away that Bottle Job Racing BMW's position. On board now with Skeppers, headed into the left-hander, 90 degrees to the left, then 90 degrees to the right as they head back onto the pit straight. And again, I say, looking at all the onboard cameras, the Ford seems to have the most stable base of all these cars. The BMW seems to bounce around quite a lot, as does the Porsche. What are your thoughts on that? Which car do you think looks the strongest at this track so far?
Well, the BMW is arguably the strongest car at this track. It really enjoys the types of corners. However, as you mentioned, it's still very stiffly sprung, so although there aren't many, there are some quite high curbs, so if the BMW gets anywhere near them, it gets quite unsettled. So long as you can avoid them, it's a very solid option, but it's just got to be careful about that because it'll get unsettled. After that, you kind of think Ford is a very good option around here as well, especially with some of those high-speed corners after the big, long back straight that we have here, and the Porsche is also very strong. Just basically watch out for anyone in a Ferrari because there's not really anything slow speed here to speak of. Very long, very high, medium speed corners, and Ferrari just then sort of overheats its tires, loses a lot of grip, and doesn't end up being very fast in those kind of conditions. So BMW drivers looking strong, Porsche drivers looking strong, Ford drivers looking strong, Ferrari drivers in a bit of trouble.
Speaking of Ferraris, taking a look here at Daniele Mamano in 4th place in AM, that Raptor Racing car. Currently trying to chase down the Ferrari of V3 Racing just ahead of him. That is Merlin Cooper, currently on the podium in class. And, I mean, that battle in AM has been quietly very close between all those drivers. So Falco Verkamp still leading in that class, followed by Jan Calmet, Merlin Cooper, Daniele Mamano, and then Alessandro Pontecorvi. So we've seen a lot of the same drivers towards the front of the AM field. But the racing itself seems to be much more competitive than the other categories thus far.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of at the point in this race at the moment where there isn't going to be much battling going on. Everyone's trying to sort out their positions in the race, trying to work out what they want to do, how they want to try and make positions, because you got a lot of trains going on at the moment of drivers just trying to use that slipstream effect because it is just so powerful on that back straight, especially without that bus stop coming into effect as well. So, as actually I think that was Andy Gorton trying to take the lead of his train, and he did it successfully going through turn 5 at the outer loop, and maybe he'll be trying to kind of convince Asgood that he can be the faster of the two because he wants to try and get onto the back of that lead train, but basically what that means is he's got to lap at the same pace as Alex Bennett, and we know he is a quick driver because everybody else is going to be going at sort of the same pace, trying to stick with him. So Andy's got to try and match the pace of one of our strongest pro drivers.
And you can see just how hard Hebsgaard is driving that car, extending almost every single corner. You saw him get his right sides of the grass coming into the boot as they re-enter the what was the original circuit, the short loop. Andy Gorton now able to gap a little bit on Hebsgaard now. That's exactly what he's going to want to see out of his mirror, is that orange BMW getting smaller and smaller and smaller as he will cross the line. Now, third in line there is Alfie Lawrenson, followed by Mike Skeppers. Lawrenson in that BMW just behind his fellow manufacturer teammate. As they hop over that curb in turn 1, it can be very difficult to keep control of those cars as they slide over, especially in how hot these temps are. So if they're not careful with those tires, that's a corner that they can very easily overheat their tires, and that can, if you mess up that corner, you've messed up your entire half the lap because you're flat out from turn 1 all the way up through the outer loop.
Yep, and once again with just 44 degrees. In fact, it's even gone up as time's gone on, the track temp. So the drivers are going to have to keep watching that. A lot of them will have overlays and applets that can tell them what the track temp is doing and relay that information to them. So they will have an idea what's going on because they don't have engineers, or at least most of them won't have engineers and spotters telling them this. So therefore they will use that information to their advantage to try and work out whether they can what to do to monitor their tires and manage their tires and keep them in the best shape, because at the moment, they're not going to be struggling too much, but just sort of as we approach pit stops, especially when the tyres are going to get very hot, they might cool down while the car is stationary and then work their ways back up to critical over time. But right now, I think is kind of the point where we might start to see a little bit of a drop-off.
So now taking a look at the front of the field again, taking a look at Rainer Talvar in the 121 Ford. 2 BMWs, 2 Fords, all from Comrade Gaming. BMW from Ford, from BMW, then Ford. That is, clearly showing their dominance is Comrade Gaming, as they've pulled away their own little train. The next car behind them is the 185 of Andy Gorton, trying to catch up to them. He's pulled away from Asger Hebsgaard in that orange team question mark BMW. So that privateer car, clearly quite fast, but he's going to have to work his butt off in the slower sections of the track, which there are very few of, to catch up to that draft of the lead ahead. Otherwise, he's not got much of a chance to make a difference there. Now taking a look at third place in our Pro-Am, Oleski Seleznev. That is the 205 BMW, that very brightly covered Hello Kitty BMW, making a move to the inside of the Radicals. Or sorry, that's not the Radicals BMW, that is Kiefer McKenna. He has just gone past, so that is a pass for position in Pro-Am. McKenna now falls to third in class. So second, third, and fourth in Pro-Am have found each other. That is the Privateer entry from V3 Racing Purple from Radicals Online. Just behind them, the Team Shazoo Omega car of that's 13th in place. Philip Schiff, that is the 176 car, and after them is 5th in category Hyperion Racing Blood Orange.
Yep, Hooper, that driver who's in 4th position in the class, I believe he's actually having to drive without force feedback, or at least very minimal force feedback because of technical issues. But he at least was trying to make an attendance because he just wanted to start racing, especially coming up to Nordschleife. I know he loves Nordschleife, so he really wanted to get out on track, and that just, it shows that he's doing very well to be 4th in class with essentially no feedback as what the car is doing, and especially with the busted rear end that he's currently got going on. It just means that he's doing a pretty stellar job to be up into 4th in this category.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that bit of damage on the rear end of that Radicals BMW. Now on board with Craig Dancy, trying to make a move on the Ford V3 Racing entry of Mike Deppers. He will get to the inside, to the right side, coming up the hill, and head it towards the outer loop. Normally, those drivers would brake and turn right for that bus stop, but in this layout, they are not going to do that. So Craig Dancy now up into... that is 8th position in class, in Pro class, that Radicals Online entry. So he's going to try to continue to advance his positions as Mike Skeppers continues to lose them.
I think Craig saw there was a bit of a gap forming in front of Mike towards Lawrenson, so I think he kind of went, I need to be in front because I know I can probably go a bit faster than you, so I'm going to take that position, try and catch back up to them, and he has. He's only now half a second behind Lawrenson, so that keeps him into that slipstream window. And that's one thing you've got to be careful of. I know I keep saying about sticking in the slipstream, but you got to make sure you can actually do that, because if you let off a little bit, then you're just going to end up kind of costing yourself and shooting yourself in the foot, because as much as it's worth not fighting, sometimes actually taking a driver behind you who's faster, letting him go past, can then pull you back to the train in front. However, speaking of people breaking away from trains, Andy Gorton has managed to get away from that battle behind him of Hebsgaard, and he's starting to close in on Blair Mann. The gap is now 1.4 seconds, so he's doing all he can really to try and get into that train in front of him. He can see it just down the road, right in front of him, but now he's going to see just how annoying it is, because he'll see on his relative that Blair is going to start going further and further away because of his straight line speed, but then as they get through the infield sort of sections, those long sweeping corners, he'll start to fall back again into Andy's clutches, and they'll come back closer to him.
Now, we were just taking a look at the change for the lead in AM class. Jan Calmet able to take the position away from Falco Veerkamp. That is the BMW able to pass the Ferrari. Or no, that is 2 BMWs. That battle was actually broken up by a Pro and Pro-Am driver that were trying to get through at the time. So a little bit of influence from other classes causing some issues in the AM battle. Now taking a look at Hebsgaard trying to... Oh, and he's put him in the wall! Hebsgaard has put Alfie Lawrenson into the wall, entering the boot there. So the aggression from Hebsgaard continues. Lawrenson already resets. We've got to try and find a replay of that, but that was... the stores are going to have to take a look at that. I'm not sure what your thoughts on that are, James, but to me it looked like Hebsgaard just did not give him any room. He was trying to race him, pass him clean. Hebsgaard had the preferred line and yet still slid all the way to the outside and just put him straight into the wall.
Yeah, I mean, it was all going fine. Both drivers sticking to the line. Hebsgaard trying to squeeze maybe, or trying to take that outside line, but didn't have the awareness to see that Alfie was still alongside him. I mean, he should have a spotter at least in game, or crew chief or something that tells him that he's still there. So you can't just swipe across another driver. And I mean, Hebsgaard already has 2 stop-go penalties this race, and even more on top of that, I think. So he's got like 3 penalties this race to serve, and he might have even more for future races. And we do have a penalty point system now, which means that if this kind of driving does continue, then his place will be under consideration from the stewards.
Yeah, I think that's something that needs to be looked at. We've seen a lot of aggression from Hebsgaard throughout the season, as now we can see Craig Dancy making a move to the inside. That's the Radicals BMW on the Team Question Mark BMW. But to continue that conversation, Hebsgaard seems to be just driving in over his head. I mean, that was a really, really aggressive move that you wouldn't expect to see, especially from a driver in the pro class. I would venture to, race. Especially in a 120-minute race, I would venture to say that the expectation would be much higher of him, especially considering he already has 3 penalties this race. You would think he would try to keep his head down and just go with the flow, not try to cause too many issues. But as now we see side by side in Pro-Am, that is Roberte Edouard trying to take the position away from Andreas Ludus, I believe that is. He is just alongside the 236 BMW, able to keep the position, but he overdrives the toe of the boot. So the Porsche able to make the crossover move to the right side. A little bit of damage on the rear end of that Porsche RSR 919. He is now to the inside. He will have the preferred position. Just got a nose on the inside there. And contact, a little bit of contact. Both drivers stay on the track. As you can see, the Raptor Racing Ferrari just behind them. So a little bit more damage to the left side of the Porsche and the right side of the BMW as they come together a little bit. I think that might have been a bit of a Rubbins Racing incident. I don't think either of them had too much of an issue there. But that battle will continue to rage on as the BMW of Ludus able to hang on to his position as they now come across the pit straight.
Yeah, obviously Ludus doing a fairly good job there to try and keep in front of this train, trying to... Well, I mean, he's got a 3.5 second gap in front to Chris Yardley, so that's going to be quite a mammoth effort if he's going to think about trying to make that up. And that then comes down to thinking about sort of strategies to try and get you out of the situation that you are. Actually, on the back straight, you have Alex Schmidt currently going defensive on Victor Matios. Owen Blythe, I think, was going defensive as well. Matios looking around the outside. Oh, and actually, that's a spin. I'm trying to see who that was. That is
Comet. That's Comet. He was the leader in. He was just the leader in AM. So a mistake from the AM leader. That's going to be a lot of damage to that BMW, the 307 car. So Falco Vierkamp will retake the lead. He has a several position advantage over the rest of the AM field. We'll see the replay there. Doesn't look like any contact, just looks like Comet drove in a little over his head, got loose, overcorrected to the left, and hard contact with the right front of that car into the outside wall, outside of the carousel there. So going to be some serious damage to the suspension of that BMW as he has a whole train of cars just behind him now.
Yeah, I mean, he was... When your steering wheel is, like, turning right at most, like, 2 degrees... When you're going through carousel, you know your car is very on the edge, and I don't think he basically didn't turn right for most of the corner, and actually now he's gone off in the penultimate corner, sticking to the inside, sticking very nicely there. Actually, he's not pitting. I thought he was going to stick to the inside and take the pit lane there, but instead he's not. He's going 3 wide now down the pit straight with some of his fellow rivals, and actually down the inside he's just nudged. I believe that's a Raptor Ferrari there, and that is just...
Daniel Mamano.
When your car is damaged, you shouldn't be sending it in like that. I mean, you're not really in the position to be fighting it. You shouldn't really be ruining other people's races, but This is sometimes what happens with Watkins. On the face of it, it looks like quite a wide track sometimes, Looks like you can do quite aggressive racing with each other, but there is a very little margin for error. So drivers proving that already in some of these battles. And actually trying to go around the outside of Kelmut there was Merlin Cooper, but he's run out of grip and just gone a bit wide, but luckily managed to keep it all together before hitting the wall, but has lost a few positions from that.
Now Falco Beerkamp, who should be our leader in AM currently, well, we're now taking a look at Merlin Cooper, but here is Verkamp. He should be our AM leader now, though the timing screen has not updated yet. He should be our leader. He is in a train of Pro-Am cars. He was actually just in a battle with that car ahead of him. That's Owen Blythe, who is in the Pro-Am category. So what are your thoughts on the topic of, say you're an AM driver, you've good pace, but you're in a battle with Pro-Am drivers. Is it worth battling to keep that position? Whoa, big contact, huge contact. Who is that? That is Witowski, the Polish driver, the 123 Porsche, as he is now out of the race. Hard contact. We'll take a look at the replay there. That's the Carbon Esports car in the Pro category, coming through the left-hander here. Oh, and it looks like there was a car stopped. That was the 291, the BMW, gets launched into the sky. I believe that was Kiefer McKenna that he made contact with there. Nothing the 123 could do, moving while stopped just across the track, broadside contact with the BMW. Nothing that he could do, in my opinion. But wow, that was tough contact there.
That was really just quite scary stuff, and if it was a real life event, I mean, it's still quite startling to see. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those ones where it's a really tricky situation, and that when there are other cars coming, you have to kind of sometimes wait, but it's also very difficult because you're in the middle of the track, and it's just one of those situations where it's very hard for drivers to know exactly what to do. And unfortunately, both drivers coming off very, very poorly on that, and I don't see them coming out on track in quite some time.
Now, as we take a look at the battle for the lead, looks like the top three Comrade Gaming cars, Alex Bennett, Rainer Talvar, and Martin Nedelik, are still have quite a gap, though Blair Mann has fallen off the back of that train and is falling into the clutches of Andy Gorton behind him. But to get back to what we were talking about, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, James. As an AM or Pro-Am driver, if you have the pace to be racing with a class higher than your own, is it worth racing them to keep cars between yourself and the rest of your class, or is it worth taking the safe route, letting them go, and not risking making contact or making a mistake yourself that could end your day entirely?
I think it can be sometimes very circumstantial. I think you have to be. I think this is one of those ones where you have to be very switched on to what your race scenario is. If it's advantageous for you to try and overtake some of the guys in the higher classes because it puts cars in between you and your AM or Pro-Am rivals, and you need that, or because you feel like you can catch a different train or something like that, then by all means you got to battle them to get past them. But if you're not much quicker, then sometimes it's better to save fuel and overtake people in pit stops, because it can be sometimes more effective. I mean, you can sometimes gain 2 or 3 seconds in a pit window, whereas you can gain maybe a tenth or two out by driving faster. So once again, it's one of those things where you got to be switched on. You got to be looking for those opportunities to take advantage of those different situations.
So now we're taking a look here at Blair Mann, currently about to come under pressure from Andy Gorton. Looking at the last lap times, Gorton's been really strong, about a tenth faster than both Blair Mann and Martin Nedelik ahead of him. Nedelik and Mann both ran 42.2s last time. Andy Gorton about a tenth faster with a 42.1. And he, other than Rainer Talvar, is the fastest car on the track at the moment. He's caught the draft of the car ahead of him. I think if he can get by Blair Mann without too much of a battle, he could be close enough to catch back up to the draft of that front pack and still have enough time to try to fight for a podium. As a little bit of dirt flying up from the teammates up ahead as they try to continue their formation, though it looks like Alex Bennett slowly pulling away from the cars behind, as he was 2 tenths faster than Rainer Talvar in the 121 Ford that last time around.
That was very nearly contact between the teammates, as Talvar was doing a bit of weaving on the straight there. That's very slightly interesting, because he kind of went to defend his position, but it was very, very late. In fact, too late, in my opinion, because Nedelik had already sort of said that I want to go down the inside. and Rayner tried to sort of shut the door, but did it just at the wrong point in time. And Martin, very switched on, very alert, and saw that happening and managed to step on the brakes quick enough. But I'm afraid if you're causing the driver behind to step on the brakes on the straight, then that's just perhaps not the best thing that you could be doing.
Yeah, definitely interesting with your teammates, especially. That would be quite the conversation in the team meeting at the end of the week. So currently, looking at our standings, it is BMW, Ford, BMW, Ford, Ford in the top 5. Bennett, Talvar, Nedelik, Mann, Gorton. Craig Dancy has made some incredible progress towards the front of the pack. That 154 BMW from Radicals Online, currently just ahead of Mike Skeppers in the V3 Racing 196 Ford. Dancy almost within striking distance of Gorton, so if he and Skeppers can continue making good lap times and working together in the draft, I think we could end up seeing a 6 or 7 car battle for the lead towards the end of this one.
Craig, yeah, I mean, he didn't have the best qualifying compared to his practice. I think he made a mistake in turn 1 is what I saw, and he lost him a lot of time on his lap. So, I mean, he's trying to do damage limitation. He's doing it very effectively. First race in the pro category, doing a very good job at the moment. I think he finished around 5th overall last race in Daytona, and looking like he might be able to emulate that today. He's just got the slightly difficult task of catching Blair Mann and Andy Gorton. That's not an easy one, as any regular viewers from previous seasons will know. Both those drivers very, very quick, and Dancy's got his work cut out for him if he wants to try and catch those guys.
So in terms of the team's championship, currently we have Comrade Gaming, Comrade Gaming, Comrade Gaming, Comrade Gaming, Privateer, that is Andy Gorton, Team Shazoo Omega, that is Craig Dancy, though I believe he is Radical's team now.
Yeah,
then
we've had a lot of transfers this week.
Yeah, a lot of moves there. V3 Racing Gold, then another Comrade Gaming car, that is Cass Hoganout, and then the leader in Pro-Am, Team Shazoo, that is Dan Alpel, who has shown strong pace, but now only 2 cars between himself and, or 1 car, excuse me, between himself and second place Oleski Seleznev. That is Michael Eden's sandwich, the sandwich in the Pro-Am, the meat in the Pro-Am sandwich. And now we see the battle between Blair Mann and Andy Gorton getting hotter and hotter every lap. Gorton clearly has much better pace than the cars ahead, as the interval between himself and the car ahead just 0.3 of a second, and I believe that is well within striking distance of the draft. We'll see if he's able to pull a good amount of that gap away from Blair Mann. We'll ride on board with him coming up through the S's and down the straightaway, that back straightaway that you can just see ahead of them in the windshield, the lead pack of 3. He's not able to quite draft up alongside Blair Mann. He gets out of the gas a little early, going to try to keep some air on the nose of that car by going a little bit wide, about half a lane out, and not quite able to make the move yet, but Andy Gorton showing a good amount of pace, trying to break up that train of 4 Comrade Gaming cars, and looking at the back end of that Ford of Blair Mann, quite unsettled. Looks like the rear end of that car not quite agreeing with Blair.
He's had a bit of a difficulty adjusting to the Ford. He switched to the car this season, and it's not an easy car to get your head around sometimes. It can, especially under braking, when you're turning as well, which you do in a lot of these corners. It can get very unsettled. It's one of those things that you have to train your brain to avoid making a mistake while doing. I think Blair will also be kind of doing sort of a rear gunner role for CIG right now, because as much as I think Gorton is trying to use Blair's slipstream to save a bit of fuel as we approach the pit stop.
Sideways. Ben Goldie off track again. Comrade Gaming Ford, the 297 car, off track yet again. That, I believe, is in the last corner, and now we're seeing some pit stops from our leaders. Rainer Talvar has taken away the lead from the 111 of Alex Bennett. Alex Bennett, the first to go down pit lane this time, and as we see a large gaggle of cars, among them Cass Hoganout. There is Mike Skeppers as well. I believe Dan Alpel in the pit lane as well. So we're going to see a bit of a shakeup in the lineup here. Taking a look at Dan Alpel coming into his pit stall. Looks like a car has missed it. Dan Alpel barely goes over the line, so he will have to back up and lose a little bit of time. A long train of cars there coming into the pits, and now that is Alex Bennett coming out of the pit lane. That is our leader. Clean in, clean out from Bennett. That's exactly what he needed. We'll see if he's able to pull anything of a gap. And side by side, coming off the pit lane battle here, Craig Dancy loses the spot to Mike Skeppers. So Dancy, not quite as fast on pit lane. Skeppers able to take the position away in the fort. We'll see if Dancy able to make a move coming up the hill. The BMW certainly looks to have a bit more grunt in the straights. He's flashing the lights there. Relatively valid reason. He'll pull alongside of the 196. Mike Skeppers defending the inside line. And Dancy not able to do anything with him coming into the outer loop.
I think that was a flash of the lights of basically saying go ahead, because he lifted off. He didn't want to challenge him. And Mike was holding the inside line, and obviously that's just going to slow them down if Dancy tries to let him keep the lead, but he's on the wrong side of the track. So I think that was him just trying to signal, just get back on the right side. I'm not going to challenge you. I just want to go fast. So can you please just not worry about me? I just want to sit there behind you and let you do your thing. And they're perfectly valid reason to flash the lights, just to try and communicate with other drivers. So yeah, and now actually we have the rest of our leaders into the pits. We have Talvar, Nadlik, Gorton, who overtook Mann into turn 5 on that lap. I think he kind of knew it was his in-lap, so he was like, I've got to try and make as much ground as possible. Will Gorton try the underfuel that he likes to do a lot, which means that he would be able to try and get onto the slipstream of Nadlik at the back end of that lead train instead?
Looks like he's done it.
In fact, he hasn't. He's got the same sort of gap he had before, so he hasn't tried that. But in terms of the actual pit stops, Bennett has rejoined just in front of his teammate Nadlik, but behind his teammate of Rainer Talvar. So Talvar now will take the lead for this second stint, which might just be beneficial for Bennett, because now he can do what Talvar did last stint and sit there and fuel save and try and make it up in that final stop that we'll have in about half an hour's time.
Well, now the teammates were side by side coming up the hill, so we've had a shake-up. Now it is Ford Comrade Gaming from BMW. Then behind them, Andy Gorton has now broken up the quad group of Comrade Gaming cars. He is just about second, 1.3 or so seconds behind that lead group. Rainer Talvar has now taken away the lead, so a little bit faster on that pit stop, but Andy Gorton well within striking distance of that lead, and Rainer Talvar goes wide in the toe of the boot. That's going to tighten up those leaders, so a little bit of a mistake from Talvar, possibly overheating the tires on that outlap. Good cooperation from the leading teammates. They were side by side coming up the hill. They could have stayed side by side, but it looked like Nedelik was mature and let off the gas, let his teammates go by into second place. But Blairman, one way of putting it, he has been the weak link of the four so far in this race. But Andy Gorton, representing basically the best of the rest in that privateer entry, trying to catch up to our leaders.
Yeah, Gorton was about 1.6 seconds faster in the stops than the people in front of him, and he's now 1.1 behind Nadlik, which I think is just on the realms of slipstream. So he might have actually managed to pull off the strategy that he needed to get into this lead train. And actually, Martin making a bit of a mistake through one has given him a 1 second gap. So I think he should have just tucked in there to the slipstream, which basically means he'll be trying to pull away from Blair as much as possible, and although his final stop might be a bit longer, it means that at least he can try and consolidate a 4th position at worst, and then try and fight for a podium later.
So to take a look at the gains and losses since the beginning of the race, Alex Bennett has retaken the lead, so that is +1 for him from his grid position. Rainer Talvar -1. Martin Nedelik, where he started in P3. Andy Gorton up 2 positions from his starting spot. Blair Mann down 1. Craig Dancy, the biggest mover it seems in the top 10, up 4 positions from where he started. Mike Skeppers, where he started in 7th. Cass Hoganau up 1. Dan Alpel, the leader in Pro-Am, is net 0. Michael Edens +2. Followed by Oleski Seleznev, it is +1. And the biggest mover so far, Tom Hooper, currently P3 in class, that is Pro-Am. He is up 5 spots from where he initially started. And Philip Schiff just behind him, 11th in Pro. He is up 3 positions.
Hooper actually is getting very close to the back of Luxak in front of him. But Luxak had actually made the pass on this lap, so maybe that's perhaps the reason why Hooper, obviously with that damaged rear end, meaning that he might just want to get into someone's slipstream to try and kind of get back the straight line speed that he's lost, and actually looks at getting very wide in the heel of the boot. So that's not going to be helping him out too much. But he's still managed to pull away a little bit from Hooper there, and they've still got Philip Schiff behind them, newly promoted into pro, not going as well as his other recent promoted compatriots, Craig Dancy and Hugenhout, who are 6th and 8th overall and in pro, so they're having a much better time of things than Schiff. But I mean, it's one of those things where you kind of have to realize whether it's a good idea or not whether to have promoted him. I mean, like in the previous races, sure, he should have been in pro. He was fast enough for it, but we're now in round 5, and here he's not doing as well. We'll have to see at the end of the season whether it turns out as a good decision or not. But today, at least, is not proving the best thing for Philip. But it's definitely where Dancy and Hogenhout deserve to be right now, because they are doing a mighty fine job in the sort of the midfield the midpoints of the pro category.
And the day goes from bad to worse for Ben Goldie, off track yet again, coming out of the boot. So definitely not a strong showing for that car.
No, he's on the highest instant points of any driver, and he's on 14. Just a reminder to anybody who's not a regular viewer, we have 18 instant points before you get a drive-through in this race. So Ben is very close to that already, and we still have half the race to go. Whereas another high driver is Thomas Santo on 12, but then Stephen Brumfield is 3rd with 8. So above Brumfield below Brumfield there isn't really much to worry about, but just mainly those top 2 of Santo and Goldie, who are very low down the field, just need to watch themselves and try not to get that drive-through.
Oh, Brumfield has been off in the carousel. Doesn't look like any damage to that car, but he was well off the track and off the pace. Currently under pressure from his teammate, Owen Blythe, in the V3 Racing Ferrari, that pair in Pro-Am and Am class. So the points leader in Pro-Am not necessarily having the strongest showing as he's had before. Well down the field, 22nd overall.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've kind of once again we're in the middle phase lull of this race, where you're kind of not really doing too much in this middle stint because of the fact that actually that's a BMW running wide of Craig Dancy. He's made a mistake going through the toe of the boot. That's lost him a lot of time to Blair Mann, and that's not going to be beneficial because Blair's slipstream would be also crucial for trying to challenge for an overall top 5, but Dancy's now got to worry about Mike Scapers behind him as they go through to the end of the lap towards the start-finish, going through this sort of second short shoot, and then through the final couple of corners. But yeah, we're kind of in the stage now where drivers are going to sort of be in a position where they don't want to make too many grounds because they can't, because it's quite strung out, and also they're not going to mean too much because strategy is at this stage in the race more important than actual physical raw pace, whereas at the start you're trying to get into a good position to build your race on, and the final stint is kind of where you have at it and try and get past as many drivers as possible. So at the moment we're just going to have to kind of sit here, look for any instance. It is a tricky track, but the drivers have actually managed it very well, a lot better than I think a lot of people would have expected, because of the fact that it is very, very tricky to survive around Watkins.
Yes, indeed, and despite how simple the layout might seem, it is very challenging despite how few corners it has. Dancy, we've seen, has a lot of raw pace, but we've seen several mistakes from him, as much like Asger Hebsgaard, who seems to have fallen back quite a bit, now in 12th position in class. He had been getting close to the tail end of that lead group before his pit stop, so some sort of issue for that car.
I wonder whether he's felt one of his many penalties that he has for this race.
Very true. That is what I would expect, as Dancy now catching back up to Blair Mann yet again. So the pace from the Comrade Gaming Ford, not quite what it has been in the last couple weeks, as Andy Gorton has caught onto the back end of that lead train. He is making great progress towards the front. He could be well up on the podium towards the end of this race. I mean, I could argue that he has some of the best pace in the entire field. Now taking a look at Owen Blythe, going to the inside for position on, that is Alex Schmidt, just ahead of him in the Porsche. That is for 6th and 7th in the Pro-Am class. Just behind them is the leader in AM, Falco Verkamp, in the 316 BMW. He's been staying out of the way of that battle so far. But Blythe trying to put some pressure on Schmidt, try to force him into a mistake as they re-enter the short chute coming out of the boot.
Yep, and I'm just trying to see if there's anything really going out on track of any other worth. I mean, just looking
I'd
at
like to
gaps
take a look
and
at the
stuff.
leads.
Yeah, the lead is, I mean, they're kind of just being very sensible and boring and annoying in that regard because they just they don't want to fight each other because it's not really worth much in terms of time. But in entertainment, it would be great. But especially since 3 of them are all teammates with each other, they're probably just going to try and help each other to try and get the best overall result. They've got to try and work out a way to get Gorton out of the situation. I mean, his pit stop later in the race should be about 1.5 seconds longer. So that's the kind of only advantage these CIG drivers have, is that they know that Andy will drop back in the pit stops, but they've just got to be very careful of him because he does still pose a threat. He is right there on them in terms of track position. And any mistake, he will be there to capitalize upon. Blair behind them is really, really struggling. I mean, he was at one point in that train and he's now almost 5 seconds behind it. He's 5 seconds off the lead at least as well. So he's just got to try and do damage limitation from this point on. Like I said, he's not enjoying the switch to the Ford that he has chosen to do for this season. And I think it's kind of taking his toll. I mean, he did a good job in Imola, but here at Watkins, I think Suzuka wasn't great. I mean, there was issues at the start there, which didn't help at all, but yeah, he's just not had the strongest of seasons, and I think partly at least it is down to car choice. I mean, he's a very quick driver on most days, so I mean, in terms of making excuses for him, I feel like that's a very good one.
And that battle for 6th and 7th in Pro-Am continuing to heat up. Owen Blythe still putting pressure on Alex Schmidt just ahead of him. And again, still behind them, Falco Verkamp. Only one position between 1st and 2nd in AM between Verkamp and Cooper. That is Victor Mateos, the meat in the sandwich for the AM lead. Then yet another car in between Cooper and Pontecorvi for 2nd and 3rd in class. Actually looks like... Nope, never mind. That's an error on my screen. But that battle for P5 that is in Pro, that has tightened way up. Blair Mann has lost the position to Craig Dancy, so they are very close together. Dancy now leading that train of 3, and that is Mike Skeppers just behind them, going to try to take the position away from Mann as well.
Yeah, Craig, I think realizing the pace of Blair Mann is not what he needs to be trying to pull out a good result here. So he's kind of taken the initiative and said, I'm going to lead this train now. I mean, you're having your own issues, so just sit in my slipstream, kind of just try and stick with me because I can probably go faster than you can.
And also worth taking a look at, I think Andy Gorton, the only way that he can offset, assuming he's taken a shorter pit stop this last time, under that assumption, I think the only way that he can offset that is if he tries to overtake those 3 cars ahead of him. He's got to make moves. He's got to break them up. He can't let them sit comfortable leading the race. Granted, he can save fuel staying in their slipstream. However, I think there's also a large benefit in trying to attack, trying to break them up, and trying to break their focus. As we see Craig Dancy pulling away from the 2 Fords behind him, Blair Mann and Mike Skeppers. Skeppers not yet able to pass Blair Mann, that we will go on board with him as he gets mighty close just behind. Not going to make the move this time. He'll let out of the throttle early and allow Mann to have just a little bit of breathing room this time. Mann coming off of the yellow line through the carousel. Mike Skeppers able to hold a pretty wheel tight to the inside, but still not quite quick enough to make the pass on the Comrade Gaming Ford ahead of him.
Yeah, and I think in that lead battle at front, Gorton will very much be eyeing Bennett because of the fact that he led the first stint and had to go a lap shorter. He's leading this stint, which means he's probably have to go another lap shorter. So in terms of actual second pit stops, Bennett might even be longer than Gorton's will be. So it's going to be in terms of getting a podium, I think Gorton is still in a very good position because he'll be able to stick with Bennett and be sort of on the same strategy as Bennett. But the two in the middle of this train essentially are kind of the drivers that we're probably going to be looking at fighting for the lead when this second pit stop rolls around because of just their strategic positions and being able to have saved all this fuel behind Bennett out in front. I mean, I don't know what the call is like and whether Bennett offered or whether Talvar demanded it or what happened in the CRG team radios essentially, but whatever the case may be, the man on pole has been the man that got the slipstream as well, so I think there has to be at least some team element to that.
I think it is very interesting, though. In the past races throughout the season, Talvar, before switching to CRG, was extremely dominant. Had several seconds of pace over the rest of the field. I'm not sure how his setups have changed from going from the Radicals Online team to CRG, but potentially, maybe that setup's not working quite as well for him. Perhaps his dominance has been overridden a bit by that team swap, as we see Goldie yet again off the track, and he will reset. I think it might be time to call it a day for that car. Now looking at the battle now for that is, I believe, 6th overall. Mike Skeppers to the inside there of Blair Mann in the carousel of the outer loop. I believe he was able to make that pass. Yes, he was able to make that pass, excuse me. So he has now gone up one position, able to follow Craig Dancy. Now taking a look at Andy Gorton, still on the back end of that train ahead of him. I think Talvar might even be holding Nedelik up just a little bit. Maybe it's the handling in the slower sections of that Ford, but the BMW certainly seems to be a bit more dominant. I think the only exception to that rule in terms of pace really is Andy Gorton, whose pace has been matching that of the BMWs ahead of him.
Yeah, also on that topic of Talvar and his pace at the moment, now that you've said that, you know that he's now going to win by about a minute at Nordschleife next week, so thanks for the boring race next week, but at least this week we actually have some competition out in front. But yeah, I mean, I don't know whether it's another circumstantial thing because of the fact that at Spa it was sort of it was the same thing of he couldn't break the slipstream, and obviously Spa has that big, massive, flat out section sort of from Curve Paul Frere all the way up to Le Combe, and that means it's a lot harder to break away. Whereas at tracks where you can sort of do that, Talvar's been more than happy to do that. I mean, Daytona was a track where he broke away, but that wasn't due to the fact that obviously slipstream is very important at Daytona. It was more because there were incidents behind him that allowed him to get a gap, and he just ran away with things. So I don't know whether it's a case of he just physically cannot get away to run away, and instead his teammates and the team strategy was, we'll give you the slipstream because you're the fastest driver and you should win the race. But I think also, like you said, he's holding up Martin, and what that might mean is that those two are the fastest two drivers in that train, and they've kind of gone, well, you two get to fight it out in the final stint of the race to try and get the win, and it's on you two to have fun with that. Whereas Bennett has kind of just been the guy that's going to orchestrate that and is giving both the drivers the equal opportunity to have at it.
Well, I think without the slipstream, we'd see Alex Bennett pulling away right now because he has pulled out a bit of a gap over Talvar just behind. I think maybe just looking at the pace and the lap times recently, I think Nedelik might be cutting Talvar a little bit of slack. I think there are a few opportunities that Nedelik could have gotten the slipstream and gotten close enough to really make a move on Talvar. I think he's been playing the team game and just hanging back there as we see the top four stringing out just a little bit on board here with Gorton behind the BMW just ahead of him. And, I mean, that's got to be menacing ahead of you, seeing three similarly liveried cars just ahead of you, knowing that each one of you wants you out. I'm sure that's quite an interesting feeling, knowing that that's the podium right there. And if Andy Gorton wants any chance at it, he's going to have to break up this team performance.
It's always more terrifying when they're going side by side and you're just going, oh, no, there's just not, like, because you feel like you want to get involved, but you know any opportunity that you try and get involved, you will be instantly shut down by all three of them simultaneously. They will not let you get involved at all. It's basically their race and they don't want you being a part of it. and they will basically try and make you feel as least welcome as possible because of that sole reason of they just don't want you near them.
Well, I think we may have had a mistake from the leader in AM, Falco Verkamp. He has dropped from 1st all the way down to 5th. The new leader in class is Merlin Cooper, followed by... who is that? No, that is Falco Verkamp still in the lead. I apologize, that was an error on my timing screen. He's still in the lead in that BMW, so he's been doing a solid job, able to recover from his mistake a little bit earlier in the race. You can see the damage to the front of that BMW, the blue livery Team Shazoo car with the yellow winglets and mirrors. Now just about 8 seconds ahead of Merlin Cooper, the closest car in AM. In 2nd place, followed by Alessandro Pontecorvi, who looks to be under pressure from Cohen Van Eyck. A little bit of a gap between the two of them. Van Eyck a few seconds back. Pontecorvi and his teammate, that was Danielle Mamano, they were working very well together in qualifying. So we've seen work between teammates in both qualifying and race situations. So that's very interesting how team orders have played out here as Andy Gorton continues to be our storyline, trying to break up the team orders of Comrade Gaming ahead of him. Now, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Given how many cars that Comrade Gaming has, they have, 5-6 cars on their team, and of course, granted, they're technically on different teams because as per AOR rules, you can only have 2 cars per team, so you can just have, Comrade Gaming Black or V3 Racing Gold. What's your opinion on that, and what the rule should be? Should they limit it to, maybe the livery should be the difference, or some sort of difference between the cars that makes it so that you can't have a team like Comrade Gaming or V3 Racing, who both teams have the most teams of anyone in the series this season, to prevent from having some sort of dominance like we're seeing from Comrade Gaming in the last few weeks.
I mean, I don't think we should say that people can't enter a league, and if you're signed to a team, you're signed to a team. I mean, unfortunately, people aren't signed to teams because they want to compete in AOR. It's more to do with special events and stuff like that, and so you let people in, and they're going to team up with their organization teammates. And I think it's actually the most fair thing to have the teams split into 2 cars each, because it kind of means that it's fairer on everybody else that doesn't have such a big organization behind them, because of the fact that, say you only have one mate that you want to drive with, if you want to try and compete in that team standing, it's not very fair on everybody else if one team has 6 drivers and one of them only has 2. So it's a good balancing act, and it actually means that you kind of get within the organizations, you have team rivalries as well as driver rivalries, because you want to be the top performing team within the organization. So I think it adds actually a lot more competitiveness than it just seems on the surface. So I think that's a very good benefit. And also the fact that it's obviously the same sort of in real life GTE racing, where it's more of a manufacturer thing, obviously, but manufacturers will field multiple teams with their car. So you might have multiple Porsche teams and multiple Ferrari teams, etc., etc. And it's a nature of this kind of racing, where you're just going to have a lot of people in the same organization, same machinery, where they're going to be competing against each other.
So now, with just under 25 minutes remaining in the race, currently the leaders on lap 33. They've just come across the line. Seeing some second pit stops from some of the AM drivers. We saw Merlin Cooper coming in, a little bit of go on the broadcast. You can see a bit more spread out formation between the teammates of Comrade Gaming. Those 3 cars currently still holding the podium. Unsurprisingly, Gorton actually falling off the back of that train just a little bit. So that's interesting. Something I did note a little bit earlier when we were looking on board with Gorton is just how sideways the rear end of those cars are. They definitely don't look quite as planted as they did in the beginning of the race. So those tires and the pace falling off a good bit. And you can see when you look in those onboard cameras just how much the rear tires want to slide out, especially in these slower sections going to the inside of the boot. Currently on board with Mike Skeppers. On the nose of that car, looking ahead at Craig Dancy, the Radicals Online BMW. Just ahead of him, you can see that gap of air just underneath the diffuser getting bigger and smaller as he goes over those bumps. Big sideways moment from Dancy, yet still Skeppers barely makes up any time. So all these cars very much sideways and losing grip from those tires as Skeppers almost dives it in there, ends up going wide to avoid hitting Dancy, but well, that's going to be quite an interesting battle to see who's able to take care of those tires enough. Perhaps Andy Gorton, with how fast his pace was early in the race, perhaps he's fallen off a good bit, and perhaps that could be the case for Blair Mann as well. We noted his manufacturer change this season, not quite suiting him. Perhaps the driving style of the BMW has played a part in that, or excuse me, of the Ford has played a part in that. That Ford very rough on the tires if you drive it too hard. Definitely a car that you have to go slow to go fast, so to speak. As we see now, Cohen Van Eyck in the AM class re-entering the track ahead of Craig Dancy in the Pro class. He's going to try to get the slipstream from those guys. He's currently scored 4th in class in the AM class, that Hyperion Gaming Porsche, to the left side of the track. Dancy will cut in front of him, though it looks like he's actually going to the inside, perhaps to get out of the way of Mike Skeppers. Yep, and he will let off the gas, let Skeppers go by. Very mature racing from the 318 driver from the Netherlands.
Dancy's actually having very good pace at the moment. Last time around, he was about half a tenth quicker than the leaders, and before that, he was basically the fastest car on track. I mean, I think Scapers was maybe a millisecond quicker than him, so at the moment, he's very, very quick, and he has closed down that gap in front of him. It was 5 seconds when he took the lead of this train, and it's now gone down to 3 to Andy Gorton. And of course, Gorton's going to have a slightly extended pit stop. Obviously, Dancy hasn't been doing much fuel saving. He's been doing a lot of pushing, so we'll have to see what his pit stop is going to be like, where he's going to rejoin. But it could still mean that a top 5 is definitely on the cards for Dancy, and perhaps even maybe the back end of a podium could perhaps be on the cards for Dancy in his first race as a pro driver.
And this certainly shows the argument as to why Dancy should be a pro driver, because if he was not, he'd currently be leading Pro-Am by, 3-4 positions, and over 10 seconds. So definitely a good decision to bring Dancy up to the pro level, as we are seeing Blair Mann continuing to fall off the pace. A little bit of a spin from Cohen Van Eyck, who we were talking about just a little bit ago. Clipped the grass on the left side, coming out of the left-hander, coming to the short chute before the pit straight. He had to hold there for quite a bit and wait for cars to go by. Very smart of him to just wait there. Lost a lot of time. So, I mean, there's a big risk in being aggressive, trying to get back onto the pace quickly. And is the reward really worth it when you risk doing something like Kiefer McKenna did, rolling backwards across the track and having massive contact that ended his day?
Yeah, you gotta always be you gotta worry about where all the drivers are around you out on track, because of the fact that if you rejoin unsafely, not only you're ending your race, you're ending somebody else's race. So you gotta be mindful of everybody else and not get in the way of other people, because of just that exact reason, that you're just going to end up ruining more things than you're going to solve, and in some cases be sent to space. And I don't think that's very optimal for getting around this track very quickly.
So now we are taking a look at the group of leaders now coming up on some lapped traffic. This will be some of the first quick lapped traffic they will come up on. Just ahead of them are a couple of Pro and Pro-Am drivers, or sorry, Am and Pro-Am drivers. One of them able to come into the pit lane, so a lot of drivers making their second pit stops relatively close to their first one. It's going to be interesting to see when our leaders will have to come in for their second splash of fuel, and whether or not that will affect how aggressive Andy Gorton will be to try and get that last podium spot, or even better. I think he's definitely the driver to take a look at. I think if nothing else happens, we could expect our leaders, the teammates, Alex Bennett, Rainer Tavar, and Martin Nedelik, to basically hold station where they are. They seem pretty content, but not sure when Andy Gorton's going to really turn on the afterburners, if he hasn't already, to try and make a big move.
Yeah, I mean, one interesting thing as well is when you talk about the lap traffic is that, I mean, with the two lapped cars that are still running of Borhiller and Van Eyck have already made their second stop. The driver just in front of the leader has made his second stop. So in fact, really, take away that second stop and everyone that's driving would still be on the lead lap. So very, very good job from the entire field in that regard, because we've been racing for over an hour now, and everybody, apart from for strategy reasons, is managing to stay onto the lead lap, and that is certainly a very good achievement.
Indeed, and Watkins Glen, despite being a relatively simple track, relatively easy to learn in comparison to a lot of other tracks, especially when you compare it to the Nürburgring Nordschleife, where we'll be next week, a relatively easy track to learn, but there's so many corners that can cause so much carnage, especially when you see these groups of cars, these trains of cars that are so close together. One mistake from somebody at the front of a train can mean the end of the day for several drivers. So definitely really good, clean racing from these drivers. We love to see clean racing, not a lot of wrecks. We love to see everybody get to finish the race and get to see the best of the best go at it.
Just having a look because of the fact that Craig Dancy has made
side by side for the lead.
Oh, go
side by
time
side for the lead. Yep, Talvar making a move around the outside of Bennett, not quite able to make it. Bennett is using him up to the left side. Now Talvar will have the preferred line going into the next corner, entering the boot, but he breaks a little bit early. Bennett able to slot in just ahead of him. Not quite sure what led up to that move. Perhaps a mistake from Bennett coming up the hill, but Talvar went from having a relatively large gap between himself and Bennett to being right alongside him, took the left side going into the outer loop and was not able to quite make it stick. We're hearing on the radio now that Alex Bennett will be pitting this time. I assume he will drag his teammates in with him. I think Gorton definitely has an option in terms of strategy here, whether he'd like to stretch it out or come in with the teammates. We're going to have to keep a look at this battle. They are just behind some lap traffic. I don't think they'll get past it before they actually get to the pit lane. We're hearing on the radio some complaints of Craig Dancy stopping on the pit lane, perhaps running out of fuel. As we're going to take a look, Alex Bennett is not quite the only of the leaders. He will have Andy Gorton come in with him, so both himself and Gorton pitting a lap earlier than Talvar and Nedelik, same as the last stint. Bennett only going one lap shorter than his teammates, so we'll expect to see the 121 and 188 come in next time around. It's gonna be interesting to see how, if Andy Gorton can really turn the afterburners on, keep up with Bennett ahead of him, and if he does, if he could slot in between those teammates and try to take away a podium.
What's also going to be interesting is where Gorton rejoins in relation to...
And he's come out.
To Dancy as well, but he's actually managed to make up a lot of time on Bennett in the pit stops. Pit stop times, Gorton was about 8/10 quicker than Bennett, so he did a very good job making up that fuel he didn't put in the first stop. So he's now well and truly within a chance of challenging for that podium and challenging those other CIG cars. And in fact, I think this is going to be Gorton going for the move. He's going to pull out to the outside, going towards turn 5. He's going to have a bit of a work to do to swoop around the outside because it's a high-speed corner, but he's almost clear it actually as they approach the braking zone. Bennett will try and stick it down the inside, keeps his nose in it, and has the preferred shorter line, but Gordon will now have the inside coming into turn 6, and Bennett actually backs out of it and realizes that he might be able to maybe try and get a better run out of here, but no, Gorton, in fact, will keep the position, and that is a net P3. Throughout all of this, I said about where they rejoin in front of Dancy. Dancy is 5 seconds behind Bennett and Gorton. So, in terms of trying to challenge that podium group, that top 4 group, he's probably a little bit too far out of the running. Although he has done a lot of work to try and keep in front of Scapers, and he's actually 2.6 seconds in front of Scapers. So, it means he might still be able to solidify that top 5 that he's been working for.
So now another lap around for Talvar and Nedelik. They will continue to stay out, though Blair Mann, their teammate, will come down the pit lane. I think this is absolutely big news for Gorton, because if you looked at the last pit cycle, Bennett came out second despite stopping 1 lap earlier than his teammates. So theoretically, if that were to repeat itself, Andy Gorton would now come out second behind Talvar. Though it's interesting that Talvar and Nedelik are now staying out 2 laps longer than their teammate did, as we see Blair Mann come out of the pit lane now, as Dancy now will go past into turn 1 and up through the S's. And it looks like Mike Skeppers has fallen back quite a ways on that pit cycle. He will come out just ahead, or just behind now, of Blair Mann. We'll see if he's able to make up any time there, but I think something I did notice was Gorton, for most of this race, has been staying maybe half a lane to a lane further left on the outer loop section of the track than his competitors. I would venture to guess that both could be saving him a little bit of tire, not having to hold that wheel quite as tight, but also it meant he knew exactly what that car was going to do, exactly how it was going to handle when he made that move around the outside of Alex Bennett that now has given him the lead. So Gorton, I think, is in a very good position to take the podium, if not take a win. That would be quite interesting for the CRG cars that have dominated this race and held the top four positions this whole time, as we see the other two of the CRG cars coming into the pit lane, riding online with Martin Nedelik coming in, and now Rainer Talvar looking back at his teammate. We're going to have to take a look at where Bennett and Gorton are. They should be coming up onto the pit straight. This is going to be really interesting. This is going to be close, as Gorton currently about 3 car lengths ahead of the BMW behind him. We're going to have to see where the other 2 cars come out. Nedelik is moving. Talvar's not. Talvar's had an issue.
Does he have a stop-go penalty for something?
I don't think he's had a penalty. He's just got something wrong. Perhaps he accidentally forgot to uncheck the tires. That is huge for Rainer Talvar.
He's left the race. He is not happy with something that's happened, because I'm checking his speed as he comes into the pit lane. His speed is fine. Unless something's gone on at mid-pit lane, or he did jump up there. Maybe he got a speeding. I think the only thing that could have happened is he sped in the pit lane somehow. Got a penalty for that because he didn't go up on the jacks, but it wasn't tires. And I don't think it could have been anything else. So Talvar has been basically well and truly put out of this race. And that brings Gorton well into play, because although obviously Nedelik is at the front, Gorton has had supreme pace all race. And so it's now sort of a chase down aspect for him. He's got 1.8, 1.9-ish seconds to close down on Nedelik in these final remaining 12 minutes.
Now, this is very interesting, a bit of a flip of the script. Throughout this entire race, Martin Nedelik has been the third in that train. Now it has basically inverted. Nedelik going to be the leader, a few seconds ahead of Gorton and Bennett. So that's going to be interesting. Now, if I'm Bennett and I want to basically help my teammate win the race, you're going to want to be as big as possible in the mirror of Gorton. Keep him thinking, keep him moving. Try to keep him from being able to focus on his pace and catch up to the car ahead if you're trying to go for the team move. But I'm sure Alex Bennett, after leading the majority of the race, is going to want to take this win for himself. I'm not quite sure they're close enough. We have just over 10 minutes and 40 seconds now as they come across the line left in the race. I'm not sure if that's long enough for Bennett to both pass Gorton and pass Nedelik, though I think Gorton, if he can really turn on the afterburners, get that extra pace out of that Ford EcoBoost engine that he has underneath him, he could absolutely make a move for this race. As we see contact for position between Owen Blythe and Alex Schmidt, this battle's been raging on for nearly half an hour between these two. Blythe clearly running out of patience for Schmidt ahead of him. That is the battle for 7th and 8th in class. Blythe able to get a better run through the toe of the boot. He was able to make a little bit of contact with the RSR ahead of him. And even though the RSR does have a bit superior pace to the Ferrari, seems like Owen has been able to overcome that and has a pretty solid performance going in the Pro-Am class. And that is a train of Pro-Am cars ahead of him. Marvin Sluman, Chris Yardley, Victor Mateus, Alex Schmidt, and then Owen himself. Just behind him, Falco Verkamp and Alessandro Pontecorvi. That is the battle for the lead in AM. Verkamp has it, Pontecorvi wants it. That's about 8.4 seconds between the two of them. Following them, Stephen Brumfield, 9th in the Pro-Am category. And after that, Merlin Cooper and Thomas Kuhn, 3rd and 4th in AM class. As we see the battle continue between Blythe and Schmidt coming up the S's. We see Blythe try to make a move here. He's able to get the run. A great shot from the nose of the Ferrari as he goes to the outside of the Porsche. Schmidt holds the inside, though they have another car that looks to be slower just ahead of them. We'll see if that car will have any sort of factor in this race. Blythe able to take it, and Schmidt will finally be forced to concede the position going into the outer loop. Blythe with a power move around the outside to the left side of the inner loop, and now we'll have the position, preferred line, going through the entrance to the boot.
Yeah, I think this battle is going to rage until the end of the race. Neither driver wants to be the guy behind. They really just... I mean, it's for position in class, it's for points, it's for pride, it's for everything. I mean, they're not fighting for any championship, but it's still important to them because you want to place as highly as possible. So, I mean, they've also got the Porsche of Victor Mathias in front of them, so that's all for position. So they've got a lot of work to be doing there as well. Bennett overtook Andy Gorton and has had incredible pace since then. He was 7/10 quicker than his teammate of Martin Neely last time around. So this lead battle is definitely not settled yet. Martin has been a bit inconsistent. He's always had a lot of pace, but there's always been sort of niggling issues. I mean, he had the win in Suzuka pretty much laid out in front of him, but again, he kind of caused issues with his teammates. So it's all up in the air as to how that goes, and so he's got to just make sure he doesn't make any errors, doesn't make any mistakes, got to keep it clean, got to try and keep on pace. So he's got a lot to deal with at the moment, and this is not going to be an easy win, despite the fact that his teammates are still 1.5 seconds behind him.
So 2 things of interest that we just saw. We saw a half spin. That was from Philip Schiff in the 176 BMW, but a bit of a half spin. But that did not have much impact on the current standings. But now we're seeing that Alex Bennett has had the pace to get back past Andy Gorton and now sets his sight on his teammate, Martin Nedelik. James, do you think he has enough time to catch up? I mean, the pace has been pretty similar between the two of them. Alex has clearly had the superior car throughout the race, but I mean, quite a gap between them.
Well, they've got 5 laps to go, including this one, pretty much. We've got 7 minutes to go, so yeah, it's about 5 laps left in this race, and that basically means that Bennett has got to make up around 2.5 tenths per lap, which is what he made up last time around on his teammate. So the pace is currently good enough that he will get a chance, especially if he gets within that slipstream barrier, because then he'll be able to close up to Nedelik even faster, especially on that back straight. And I mean, he's got to make sure that Gorton doesn't try anything, because I think Andy knows that with Alex in front, that he might be able to get Martin as well, and then maybe take Alex after that. So he's got to be thinking on his feet. Alex has got to be thinking on his feet. Martin's got to be thinking on his feet. They've all got to try and deal with their race situations, and it's by no means settled up in front.
Absolutely, and that battle for the podium now almost guaranteed for Gorton to get a spot. That was something that we had questioned a little bit earlier, whether or not he was going to be able to get on the podium. But with the problems for Talvar, not only does that give Gorton almost a guaranteed podium position, but that also is going to have quite a little bit of a shakeup in the points, because now we're going to see our points leader by 68 points coming into this race have a DNF. So it's going to be interesting to see the points after this race and how that's going to impact the overall standings in the Pro Class.
And Nedelik has had to enter the pit lane. I think he might have had an He had an outstanding penalty. I forgot about this. He has a penalty from the last round for having a dangerous rejoin. So that's kind of put a blow on his battle for the lead. But we still do have a battle between Bennett and Gorton. 2 drivers, very accomplished in the pro category. Neither of them have won a championship, but they have got race wins under their belts. So both drivers will be just looking to add to that tally and maybe try and mount that challenge that you talk about against Talvar now that he's had a DNF. And that is kind of one of their best sort of points to try and get in front of Rayner in the championship some point later in the season.
Well, now we're seeing things fall apart the same way they did in Suzuka for the Comrade Gaming team. They went from having 4 cars lock out the top 4 qualifying positions, led the majority of the race, even locked out the podium for a good amount of time. But now we've had both Rainer Talvar and Martin Nedelik have issues. Talvar with a DNF, Nedelik with a penalty. So now it's only 1 Comrade Gaming car now against a privateer that is Andy Gorton going to try to mount a challenge to overthrow the otherwise dominant Comrade Gaming team.
I mean, obviously, if you throw enough attempts at it, you tend to come out with success. But at the same time, it would be nicer for them if they could try and keep all their cars up in front instead of them have them picked off one by one. And that's kind of what's happened in a lot of the races so far this season. They kind of just need to form up as a body, get into cars they enjoy in the form of some of their Ford drivers who aren't enjoying things, try and weed out some of the mistakes. I mean, Bennett has been by far probably the most consistent out of the Comrade drivers so far this season. So I think he definitely deserves to be put in this position right now. I mean, the only issues he's really had was with the start in Suzuka, and that wasn't really his fault. So, I mean, he's got really the chance that he deserves right now, and he's got to put everything on the line as we have 3 laps to go, including this one, with 3.5 minutes left.
Well, something interesting I would like to ask you your thoughts on. Who do you think, I mean, we've seen a strong performance from Nedelik, we've seen strong performances from Mann, we've seen strong performances from Bennett, and obviously Talvar before the switch. Who do you see as the lead driver in Comrade Gaming? Who do you think should step into that role to take the reins of the operation and take responsibility to say to the rest of the drivers, hey, we need to get together, we need to make sure we're minimizing mistakes, and we need to work together to lock out the rest of these teams?
I mean, it's a tough one because obviously Christoph Holstein, who's not with us at the moment because he's on holiday, should be back next week for Nordschleife, which I believe is a track he knows. I mean, that's kind of the key with Nordschleife, is whether you know it or not, and I think he does know it, and that's very influential. He's obviously probably one of the most, well, he's a veteran of the Comrade squad. Him and Dominic Gaidemeyer were here fighting many seasons before a lot of their teammates, but Chris has not had a good season so far, especially since sort of around Watkins last season. It's kind of unraveled for him around that point, and so he kind of, I don't think it's right on him to put sort of the lead role on. Obviously Talvar has recently come into the squad and is on raw pace, and in terms of the championship is definitely their fastest and top driver. But also you have to look at Bennett, and Bennett is is a guy who's made a lot of progress in the last year. He's gotten very quick over that short period of time, and is very established within the CRG team. So I mean, personally, if I was in that squad, I'd kind of elect him. And Gorton's going to think about the move going into turn 5, but can't quite make it happen. But I feel like if anyone is going to take the lead role, I think it should be Bennett. But Talvar at the same time is definitely their top driver.
So now we're seeing less than 2 minutes, about just under a minute and a half now, until the end of the race. Very close to battle for the lead. Andy Gorton trying to put pressure on Alex Bennett, trying to force a mistake, but so far it's been a mistake-free race from Bennett. So we'll see probably one more lap after this one from the drivers. Gorton just on the back end of Bennett, barely even a car length separating the two. BMW from Ford, 111 from 185. Comrade Gaming from Privateer. This is going to be a really interesting run to the finish. Andy Gorton just on the back end of Alex Bennett. He's not allowed that BMW to get away, even though Bennett was the faster of the two cars and was able to pull away just a tiny bit before Nedelik had to pull off of the track. Through the section coming around to the pit straight, Gorton not quite able to hold on to the end of Bennett a little bit. We're going to probably see I believe this is the white flag this time, 30 seconds remaining in the race. And Bennett has it. Gorton wants it. Coming into turn 1 this time, Gorton a little bit of a gap there. Maybe too much of a gap to overcome as he tries to come up the hill. I'm not sure it's going to be enough. We're on board here with Andy Gorton following the leader Alex Bennett. This will be the battle for the lead towards the end. Amazing how a race that could be considered quite boring to the end going to be a huge run from Gorton. Gorton going to come to the outside. Will he be able to make the move stick? He's done it once. Will he be able to do it again around the outside of Bennett? This is for the overall lead in the race. Looks like Gorton has it. He's just barely clear. Bennett stays to the inside. Gorton now has the preferred line coming into the boot. How will Bennett be able to pinch him down? Just barely between them, hardly any space. Gorton has to clear him if he wants to win this race. He's got him cleared. Gorton has the lead of the race. Bennett's still just behind, not even a car length between them. Will Gorton be able to run away and hold on? Only a few more corners left for Andy Gorton in the Privateer Ford. Will he be able to hold on, trying to break the slipstream from Alex Bennett behind? Bennett goes to the outside. Gorton defends the line, going to lose a little bit of his speed on exit here. Barely any space between them, hopefully no contact. Let's have a clean finish. Alex Bennett gets a better turn. Will he be able to make a run on Gorton? Gorton blocking to the left, to the right. Now he is clear by about a car length. Andy Gorton Will it be enough? Yes, it will. Andy Gorton will overcome the Comrade Gaming crew and will get his first win of the Apex Online Racing Season 11 GTE League. That was one hell of a race to the end. Alex Bennett congratulating him on coming across the line. Craig Dancy will come home with the final podium position, followed by Blair Mann and Mike Skeppers. So a strong recovery from Blair Mann thanks to some struggles from his teammates. Now we'll see Cass Hoganout come across the line. Martin Nedelik in 6th. Dan Alpel will take the win in Pro-Am. So a strong run from him. Started first in class, finishes first in class. We're looking at Victor Mateos, who's just been passed by Owen Blythe. So Blythe, after passing Schmidt for that position, that was 8th at the time, he's now gotten up to 6th position. So strong pace from the V3 Racing Ferrari. They still have to come across the line. And Falco Vierkamp will hold on against Alessandro Pontecorvi for the win in AM, followed by Merlin Cooper and Thomas Koom. So those drivers, that is the top 4 in AM. And, what a finish. There's Falco Vierkamp just behind that battle for 6th, 7th, and 8th in Pro-Am. He will come across the line to take the win in that blue Team Shazoo car with those rather bright orange winglets and mirrors. And there is second place, Alessandro Pontecorvi in the Raptor Racing Ferrari. He will come across the line in second place for the AM class. And there we see Merlin Cooper. That will be the final podium spot in AM, coming across the line just now. And that will complete our race, 120 minutes, and lots of good racing throughout. I mean, what a finish. What can you even say about that finish?
I mean, it was definitely a slow burner at times, but that final lead battle, they gave it everything, our front two. Hindsight would say perhaps Bennett's dive to the inside and into the penultimate corner was perhaps a little bit of an attempt that was never really going to pay off, and so kind of should have. I mean, it's easy to say with hindsight, but probably should have stayed behind and tried to get him on the line as his final sort of opportunity, because other than that, I think you can't really overtake in that final section of the track. So, I mean, yeah, hindsight is 2020. They both tried to give it everything. That was very clear when Gorton gave it everything around the outside of turn 5. He lost a bit of grip from it, but got him the inside for turn 6 and kept the position from there on.
So I guess we should take a look at our overall standings here. Andy Gorton took the win just barely away from Alex Bennett in an exciting finish. 0.3 of a second the difference there, followed by Craig Dancy, the Radicals Online car. Blair Mann, the other of the Fords from Comrade Gaming. Mike Skeppers, the first of the finishers from V3 Racing. Martin Nedelik, who had to serve a penalty at the end of the race and lost the lead there, followed by his teammate Cass Hoganout. That was 7th in position. Dan Alpel was the first of the Pro-Am finishers. He was 8th overall, first in class. Michael Edens, then behind him, was 8th in class in the Pro class. Then Oleski Seleznev, he was 2nd on the podium in Pro-Am. Mateus Lusek, 9th in Pro-Am, followed by Tom Hooper. Marvin Sluman, Chris Yardley, Philip Schiff will finish out the top 10. Owen Blythe in 6th with a relatively strong comeback. Didn't start the race too strong, but able to make up quite a few positions after a intense battle with Alex Schmidt. Behind him in 7th and 8th in class, Victor Mateus and Alex Schmidt. And then the winner in the AM class, Falco Vierkamp, as he comes just around the track. Alessandro Pontecorvi, who had a strong run, very quiet, under the radar, exactly what you'd want from that team and from an AM driver trying to improve his driving. Stephen Brumfield was 9th in the Pro-Am category. Merlin Cooper took the final step of the podium in AM in the number 366 V3 Racing Ferrari. Behind him, Thomas Koom, a reserve driver who made it in for today's race, 10th. Roberte Edouard was 10th in the Pro-Am category. Then Cohen Van Eyck, Marcus Bueller, and Rainer Talvar finished 11th in class. That's going to be quite a hit in the points. So I would like to ask from you gentlemen, as well as anyone else who's still racing, who would you like to nominate for the driver of the race? I personally would like to put Andy Gorton up there. I mean, what a race. He showed raw pace. He was strong. I mean, he put himself in the perfect position. Anyone else could have backed off the pace, just rode along when he saw that Bennett had gotten past him and that Nedelik had a big lead. But he hung in there and was able to make that last lap pass. Your thoughts, gentlemen.
I think from me, Gordon definitely was a very, very good driver him as well. And I think my other contender for a very good job was Dancy. First race in pro, started 11th and has made his way up the field. Obviously, misfortune for some, but other situations he played perfectly. And I think, honestly, he got the best result he could out of pretty much every situation he was given. And I think that also deserves admiration and definitely deserves a bit of attention as well.
And we haven't heard anything from you yet today, Nick, but I'd like to ask your thoughts on driver of the race. Called you out. I'd also like to make an honorable mention for Alex Bennett. Even though he didn't win the race, he lost it on that last lap pass. I think he's definitely worth a mention because, I mean, you can't really have any more of a mistake-free race than that. I mean, a clean finish. There are plenty of opportunities that he could have just punted Gorton right off the track. But working with his teammates, it was a very, very strong performance from that team overall. Certainly worth a mention. So now in the commentary box, we have none of the leading finishers in Pro are actually in the team Discord, though we do have, in a second, we have with us third place finisher, last on the podium. Craig Dancy was the last on the podium after starting a little bit further towards the back. Craig, how was your first race in the Pro class?
It went a lot better than I expected. I'm not going to lie, especially after qualifying. I don't really know what to say.
Well, we were having quite a debate. We've had quite a debate over the last couple of broadcasts whether or not you deserve to be in Pro based off of your pace. What are your thoughts on that, especially after now having the experience of racing in the Pro class?
I definitely still need to work on consistency. Because I think raw pace, I'm definitely there or thereabouts with a lot of the people in Pro. But, I mean, I tend to, apart from today, but I tend to make a lot of mistakes, maybe spin a couple of times. But I think if I keep practicing, I can hold my own in here.
So we saw quite a few misfortunes for that dominant Comrade Gaming crew who were 1, 2, 3, 4 in the beginning of the race. What were your thoughts when you started seeing Talvar have an issue in the pits and then Nedelik have to fall off? What were your thoughts on your chances at a podium coming up to the end?
It's going to sound bad, but when I seen Rainer disconnect and I knew Martin had a penalty, I had a wee bit of a celebration to myself, knowing that I'm provisionally on a podium. Yeah.
Well, it was certainly exciting seeing you out there. We're excited to see how you're able to perform through the rest of the season with those Pro guys, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Cheers. Next up, we have Merlin Cooper. James, take it away.
Hi Merlin. Good job with the race today. Obviously, I mean we didn't see as much of all of the battles further down the field, unfortunately. So take us through your race from your point of view.
Well, thank you first, and hello. I didn't feel it was a good race. My qualifying was pretty poor. Practice didn't go well. But all of a sudden, somehow I managed to have a podium. I didn't really have a lot of expectations here because I was all the time slow. But I think at some time in the race I was P1, had a good start, managed to avoid some crashes. One of them was very close and was a little bit lucky there. And at the end, I just made no big mistakes, and that's why I ended up in P3. I think it wasn't really pace. And congratulations to the winner and to Alessandro Pontecorvi. He was much faster than me on track. I just couldn't keep him.
Well, yeah, obviously, very, very good job to get the podium out of all of that. It's not a easy racetrack. But speaking of uneasy racetracks, we of course are going to the Nordschleife next week. What's your experience level with the Nordschleife? Because obviously that is a big factor with it. What if you've driven it? What are you? Do you enjoy it, or are you a bit, as a lot of people are quite rightly so, quite scared of it?
I'm really looking forward to it. It's my favorite track. I drive a lot there, and I enjoy driving VLN there. So I would say that's the race of the season for me. And I'm putting everything there and doing much more practice than I did for the races before to really have a good performance there. And let's see where it ends.
We will look forward to
on lap 1. And
that's true, yeah. But yeah, we will look forward to seeing you there in Nordschleife next week, and hope that all that practice will pay off.
Yep. See you there.
So 2 more interviews. First, we will have our winner in Pro-Am. Our Pro-Am winner, Dan Alpel. Dan, that was, first, a really strong qualifying effort, well into the pro field in terms of qualifying pace, and then just a mistake-free race. How'd you pull that off?
It wasn't mistake-free. I nearly died 10 minutes to the end, which made me cue the Titanic music in my head all over again. But, yeah, now Craig, Philip, and Cass have been promoted. I've gotten 4 out of 5 poles this season, so I kind of should have won one of those 4, but I didn't. I died in 3 of the 4, so kind of overdue for me to get a proper result.
Well, now that we're five weeks in, the battle for the lead between yourself and Brumfield currently at the top of the standings, how do you feel like your chances are the rest of the season to try and make up some of those points now that some of those drivers have been promoted, and your chances at taking the championship in the Pro-Am class?
I don't know how big the gap is, but I know I'm probably not going to do Nords next week because I've never driven the track and I don't really have time this week to learn it. I'm going to try, but if I can't get it right, I'll probably skip it. And then apart from that, the rest of the season looks great. So we might see. We'll see. I don't know. I'll try my best.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure having you with us, and it's been a pleasure watching you. Good luck the rest of the season.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now the interview I've been looking forward to most, we have Alex Bennett with us to discuss that finish. That was just about the closest finish we've had this season, and what an exciting one. What were your thoughts coming onto the last lap there?
Coming onto the last lap, just thinking I was screwed, pretty much. I had some damage from earlier in the race, so I knew it was going to be really, really difficult to defend. I was a bit down on the straights, and Andy was really, really quick on the straights, even compared to everyone else, I think. So, I knew it was going to be tough, gave it a best shot, but ultimately he did a really good job with the overtake, and just want to say well done to him.
Well, you had several opportunities that anyone could have potentially made contact with the rear end of the Ford ahead of you, and you chose not to. What was going through your head in terms of what move you decided you wanted to make instead of staying behind and trying to race it clean versus trying to send it up the inside and risking contact?
The main thing I was thinking of is that I didn't want to crash out, and there were a few cars not that far behind us. I think Craig was only about 5 seconds back, so got to play it somewhat smart with the moves I was making, and Andy just did a really good job at covering the inside and not really leaving any opportunities. I tried to put as much pressure on as I could, but ultimately I'm not going to just send it on him and barge him out of the way, which yeah, I don't know. It's not the kind of racing I like to do. So, yeah, I looked for the opportunity, but ultimately he covered it off well, and it just wasn't there.
Now, we were discussing a lot the dominance of CRG, Comrade Gaming, and that entire team. And now with the addition of Rainer Talvar, how has that changed the dynamic within the team, given Talvar's pace and his lead in the championship? And how has that affected any strategy or just the overall dynamic in the team?
Yeah, I mean, Rainer's a really good driver. He's someone that's clearly very talented, so we're happy to have him on board. And in terms of with team dynamic and whatnot, I mean, we've never had team orders in any of the races. Really, occasionally we'll work together if it's to benefit both of us. But realistically, between the CRG drivers, there's no hard team orders there at the end. We're all racing each other. So yeah, it's great to have him in the team, but at least in terms of on track, it doesn't really make too much of a difference. We're still battling each other for the positions like we were before.
And now, we saw in Suzuka a very similar situation where we kind of, your teammate, there were contact between teammates, and the race kind of fell apart for the team as a whole, referring to Comrade Gaming. And we saw something similar with Nedelik having a penalty, as well as Talvar having some sort of issue in the pit lane that caused him to retire. First of all, do you know what happened to Talvar, and how can you as a team work together to minimize mistakes like that?
So Rainer sped in the pits, and I don't think it was at the pit entrance. I think he was just a little bit too quick in the middle of the pit lane. So yeah, he got a stop and go penalty for that, and at that point, I mean, your race is effectively done. So yeah, he just quit out after seeing that he gotten that penalty. And then with Martin's penalty, that was from the stewards from a Daytona incident. So we knew going into the race that he would have to serve a drive-through at some point. So yeah, I mean, I always had that in the back of my mind, where even going into the final stint and he was in front, I knew he was going to have to serve that drive-through regardless. So yeah, he was, I think for the most part in that race, he was mostly just focusing on the drivers behind and getting himself a big enough gap that when he did serve his drive-through, he wouldn't drop as many positions. And yeah, I think he did very well with that. He got 6th in the end, which is really, really good considering the penalty.
Well, it was a pleasure watching you today. That was one hell of a race. Congratulations on the podium finish, and we can't wait to see how well you do next week at the Nordschleife.
Probably not well, because I have no idea where that track goes.
Excellent. All the better. Cheers, man.
All right, cheers, man.
Any final thoughts from you gentlemen?
Just it was like I said, slow burner, but it was that was good entertainment. Obviously, I can't wait to go watch the Nordschleife next week, even if we may not get the best racing. I mean, it's not going to be an easy track for anyone, even if you know where it goes. And as Mr. Bennett just alluded to, he doesn't know where it goes, and a lot of the drivers won't know where it goes, and that is sometimes the beauty of the, I think it's 22-kilometer long circuit, which is just it's such a task.
Well, Well, it's been a pleasure up at the booth with you gentlemen. We'd like to thank everyone for watching and joining us this week at Watkins Glen International Speedway, and we will see you at the same time next week, next Monday night at the Nürburgring Nordschleife in Germany. From myself, Brayden Hill, and my colleagues Nick Domino and James Clay, we'd like to thank you for joining us, and hope you have a great night.